8:55 Eastern Time, and Columbia brings you the nightly broadcast of Elmer Davis and the news.
Europe is still speculating about the significance of the sending of Sumner Wells overseas and of Secretary Hull's conversations with various neutral countries. Nobody, apparently, is willing to accept the simple explanation that Mr. Roosevelt might have meant what he said and was merely sending an experienced diplomat to gather information from all the leading powers of Western Europe. Even in Washington, few people took this move at its face value, though this would perhaps be the most reasonable interpretation. The French, at least, differentiate, as does the administration, between the President's and the State Department's moves, saying that the President looks at a world at war and aims at peace, while Mr. Hull starts with peace and looks ahead to the reconstruction of world economy. But, a French spokesman said, the time to talk peace would only come when the Allies had won. And the British, though offering an astonishing diversity of interpretations of Mr. Wells's visit, insist that the war must be prosecuted to victory. Stories from London and Paris that the Germans are willing to postpone any serious fighting while they wait for Wells's visit, and that Hitler is drawing up a peace program to show him, find no backing in reports from Berlin or indeed in anything else. Another story that the visit of Mr. Steinhardt, American ambassador to Russia, to the states south of the Baltic, was preliminary to a trip to Finland with peace terms, was denied by Mr. Steinhardt, who said he wasn't going to Finland at all. But the rumor evoked from the Finnish Foreign Minister Tanner the statement that peace cannot be dictated to Finland. There's no evidence that the Russians are yet willing to talk to the Finnish government at all. They've recognized the Teriyaki group of communists in its place. The 12th day of the Russian offensive on the Karelian Isthmus still got nowhere, and the Finns report the repulse of attacks on the east shore of Lake Ladoga and at Aitojoki further to the northeast. Webb Miller, veteran war correspondent of the United Press, who went out to Stockholm to send an uncensored report of the fighting on the Isthmus, says that it was probably the greatest Russian attack of the war and that the situation was probably critical for a time, but that the offensive has failed for the time being and the Finns feel no immediate anxiety. Russian air raids on Viipuri and other points on the Isthmus were reported, but our correspondent, Mr. Hartrich, broadcasting from Finland earlier this evening, said that fewer bombers have been in the air recently and that the Finns believe the Russians are suffering from a temporary gasoline shortage. On the Western Front, German planes sank another British patrol boat and German machine guns fired on French loudspeakers that were broadcasting propaganda across no man's land. Reports from London say that an Anglo-Dutch trade agreement is almost completed and that the Dutch have agreed to set up a government agency to control all imports and guarantee that they will not be re-exported to Germany. Even so, the imports permitted will be only 80% of the pre-war figure. If this is true, the British drove a hard bargain, as they drove earlier in their trade agreement with Sweden. Yet even so, they are treating the neutrals better than the Germans, who have sunk 36 Dutch or Swedish ships with the loss of a couple of hundred lives. In this war, the neutrals never get the breaks. Resentment in Ireland over the hanging last week of the two members of the IRA convicted of murder in England broke out yesterday in demonstrations both in London and Belfast. The government of Northern Ireland, perhaps disturbed by the news that IRA members had broken into the magazine of a British military camp and stolen considerable arms and ammunition, forbade the demonstration in Belfast. But 2,000 people paraded anyway, and several were hurt when the police broke up the crowd. In Dublin, 10,000 people paraded, but there was no disorder. The American Youth Congress, politely rebuked by the President yesterday, continued its sessions in Washington today and cheered its executive secretary for declaring that it welcomed the representatives of the Young Communist League among all other youth organizations. Postmaster General Farley sent a $50 contribution toward expenses of the convention, and our correspondent, Mr. Warner, reported that he got about a nickel's worth of applause for it. A United Press poll of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee showed tonight that there is strong sentiment against imposing economic sanctions on Japan, and it is possible that the embargo resolutions will not be reported out at all. And Lord Tweedsmuir, Governor General of Canada, died tonight. Better known as John Buchan, he had been soldier, politician, and executive, but he was more celebrated as the author of a long series of adventure and mystery novels and a number of historical works.
This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.